Plant once, feed your family, forever. Why don't you know about it? There is a vegetable that yields double the harvest of potatoes, survives cold that ends wheat, and once planted, never needs replanting. Then we erased it. Not because it failed, but because it was too successful. The two kings, King Henry IV, made speeches about abundance, empty promises. But while he talked, cottage gardens across Europe were already full. They did not need the king. Their pots had been filled by good King Henry. Chenopodium bonus Henricus, not a monarch, a plant. From the 12th century until the Industrial Revolution, this was the engine of European survival. It grew in every cottage garden from England to Germany. It was not something you bought or planted every year. It was perennial. You put it in the ground once and it fed you for the rest of your life. Welcome to nature's lost vault. Today we open the file on the peasant's asparagus and why modern agriculture had to destroy it. Not because it failed, because it worked too well. If a plant fed Europe for 5 centuries, required no annual labor, and returned every spring without asking permission, why don't you know its name? It was a coordinated erasure, machine, business model, revolution, 3 forces that saved 1 billion people and erased abundance in 50 years. The peasant's asparagus march, frozen ground cracks, thick stalks push through, pale green against dead earth. You snap one. It tastes like sweet asparagus, May. Leaves explode, dark green arrows. You pick them. They taste like spinach, but richer. Frost arrives. Everything else withers. Good King Henry keeps growing. This was not a crop. This was a survival machine. If you walked into a Tudor garden in 1550, good King Henry was the anchor. It shot up first when winter still gripped the soil. Those stalks were the first fresh food after months of salted meat and stored grain. Then came the leaves, thick, shaped like arrowheads. They tasted like spinach, but stronger, and they kept producing until frost ended everything else. For centuries, this plant was the backbone of medieval vegetable soups. Leeks, chard, bread, and good King Henry simmered into a vitamin-rich broth that sustained peasant farmers through brutal winters. The nutrition was complete. The labor was zero. You did not till. You did not buy seeds. You did not replant. The plant just returned, every March, every year, like a loyal friend who never left. But something this reliable could not survive what came next. Because in 1701, an Englishman invented a machine that only understood straight lines. The emperor's tribute Emperor Tiberius ruled the Roman Empire. He commanded legions. He conquered nations. He levied tribute from defeated tribes, gold, silver, slaves. But from Germanic warriors, he demanded something else. A weed. Pliny the Elder wrote about it, a plant that emperors craved. He described how Tiberius demanded it as tribute, not precious metals, a leafy green that grew wild in Germanic forests. Most historians believe he was talking about good King Henry. An emperor who owned half the known world wanted this plant badly enough to extract it from defeated enemies as payment. Tiberius wanted it on his table, every day. The Romans knew. Centuries before medieval peasants discovered it, the empire understood its value. It grew abundantly in Germania, Gaul, Britannia. The tribes ate it without thinking, just food. But to Rome, this perennial that survived freezing winters and returned every spring without human intervention looked like magic. It looked like power. The emperor wanted it that badly. So, if ancient Rome demanded it as tribute, if it fed peasants for 500 years, why did we erase it? The answer is in the machines. And they were coming. Better than kale. In 1989, scientists measured good King Henry's nutritional content. Then, in 2022, they ranked all perennial. Vegetables. Modern spinach is lost, kale lost, chard lost. The study was published in Horticulture. Good King Henry made modern spinach look like cardboard. Iron, higher than spinach. Calcium, higher than milk. Vitamin C. Off the charts. More B vitamins than most leafy greens. Complete nutrition from a plant that required 0 annual labor. The backyard larder ranked perennial vegetables for nutritional density. Good King Henry outperformed every celebrity superfood. This was dominance. So, where is it? Why are we spending billions genetically modifying climate-resilient crops when the perfect drought-proof vegetable already exists? The answer is not nutritional. The numbers prove Good King Henry wins. The answer is structural, because what happened next was not about biology. It was about geometry, and geometry has no mercy. The geometry of erasure. The erasure began in 1701, not with poison, not with fire, with a machine that could only think in straight lines. Jethro Tull invented the seed drill, brilliant, efficient, revolutionary, and it had one requirement: uniformity. The drill dropped seeds into perfectly straight rows at equal intervals. It automated planting, but it only worked with annuals. Crops you plant from scratch every year: wheat, corn, turnips, crops that obey. But Good King Henry was chaos. It grew in clumps. It spread by underground roots that wandered freely. It did not stay in the line. You could not plant it with a drill. You could not mechanize the harvest. The machine demanded an order. The plant refused. So Good King Henry was inefficient, not because it failed to feed people. It fed them better than anything else. It was inefficient because it would not obey. This is not a conspiracy. This is a geometry problem. The seed drill was designed for annuals that cooperate. Perennials that spread on their own terms were incompatible. Efficiency stopped meaning what feeds the most people. It started meaning what fits the machine. Tull wrote in 1733 that irregular plants complicated his system. He never mentioned Good King Henry by name. The machine made the choice. 36 years later, another inventor would bring violence to the soil. The steel that broke the roots. Smell it. Turned earth. Hear it. Steel scraping stone. 1837. John Deere invented the steel plow. For the first time, virgin prairie could be broken. But there was an enemy underground. Roots that refused. Before Deere, plows were wood or cast iron. They failed in North American prairie grasses. The plow broke. Deere's steel plow was different. Polished steel slicing through prairie sod like a knife through flesh. Clean. Fast. Unstoppable. Farmers could break virgin land. Millions of acres opened. But perennial root systems were the enemy. They held soil together. They resisted breaking. Deep roots, 3 feet down, tangled like steel cables. The plow fought them. Annual crops with shallow roots were easy. You plowed. You planted. You harvested. You plowed again. The system was selected for annuals not because they were better for soil or nutrition. It selected them because they were better for machines. Good King Henry's greatest strength became its crime. Those deep roots that held soil together, that prevented erosion, that survived drought, fought back. And in the eyes of the machine, resistance was inefficiency. The plow was just steel. But what came next was worse. What came next had no patience at all. The tractor's war efficiency is supposed to mean producing more with less. In 1900, it started meaning the opposite. The tractor replaced the horse, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the soil had a new purpose, not to feed, to be erased. Before tractors, farming was slow. Horses pulled plows, men walked behind. You could hear birdsong. The rhythm matched nature. Perennials could coexist with that pace. The tractor changed everything. Gasoline engines roaring. Steel blades ripping through dirt faster than any animal. Every machine we built was designed to do one thing: wipe the earth clean and start fresh every spring. Perennials like Good King Henry fought back. Their roots went down 3 feet. They held the soil. They bent the steel. They slowed the machine. And speed was the new virtue. Efficiency meant acres plowed per hour, not food grown per acre. So Good King Henry was labeled inefficient, not because it did not produce food. It was inefficient because it slowed down the tractor. Resistance equaled removal, but machines are only half the story. If the tractor was the weapon, the business model was the motive. The business model of hunger. What does a seed company fear most? In the 1920s, they discovered the answer: a plant you only buy once. The modern commercial seed industry exploded after World War I. Companies like Burpee, Ferry Morse, and Northrop King realized a fundamental truth: perennials are a terrible product. If I sell you spinach seeds, you come back and buy more next year, and the year after that. Recurring revenue. If I sell you good King Henry seeds, I never see you again. You plant it once. Your children eat from it. Your grandchildren eat from it. One transaction, 20 years of silence. This is self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency is the enemy of profit. Which crops generate the most lifetime value? Annuals won every time. Plant, harvest, perish, repeat. In 1926, an internal memo from Ferry Morse surfaced. The subject line read, Perennial Vegetable Review. The conclusion was 2 sentences. Customer retention on perennial lines remains poor. Recommend discontinuation in favor of high turnover annuals. They did not mention nutrition or soil health, just turnover. Perennials broke the cycle. They made customers independent. Independent customers do not come back. They just grow their own food year after year without asking permission. So, the catalogs began to change. Slowly, quietly, disappeared from catalogs. By 1950, seed catalogs had gotten quieter. Good King Henry just vanished. Not because it stopped working, because it worked too well. Flip through a Burpee catalog from 1920. Good King Henry is there, full page. Plant once, harvest for years. Flip through the same catalog in 1950. Gone. As if it never existed. The same pattern repeated across every major seed company. All quietly dropped. Good King Henry. The plant did not fail. It simply disappeared. This was economics. Annual crops generated recurring revenue. Perennials generated one sale and then silence. In a capitalist system, silence is the end. But here is what makes the erasure complete. When you remove something from catalogs, you remove it from memory. New gardeners browse the pages. They see spinach, kale, and chard. They never know Good King Henry exists. Within a generation, the knowledge vanishes. A gardener named Dorothy Hayes wrote to Burpee in 1952 asking why Good King Henry was gone. The reply said only, "We no longer carry specialty items with limited commercial appeal." A plant that fed Europe for 500 years. Limited appeal. This is how you erase abundance. Not with fire, not with law, with silence, with catalogs that get thinner, with options that narrow until there is only one choice left. But the biggest force was still coming. The Green Revolution's hidden cost. 1960. Norman Borlaug introduced dwarf wheat varieties that would save 1 billion people from starvation. The cost? Total dependence, synthetic fertilizer, mechanization, annual replanting, every year, forever. We saved the world. Then we locked it in a cage. The Green Revolution was a miracle. High-yielding wheat that produced more calories per acre than anything humanity had grown. Countries on the edge of famine suddenly had surplus grain. Starvation ended. Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize. But the miracle had conditions. The new wheat required synthetic fertilizer, irrigation, mechanization, and annual replanting. Every year, farmers had to buy new seeds, new chemicals, new everything. The Green Revolution saved 1 billion people, but it locked global agriculture into a system where perennial vegetables had no place. And this is the defense. Without high-yield annuals, we could not feed 8 billion people. That is true today. But it is true because we bet everything on annuals. We never funded perennial research. We assumed the answer was no. Governments subsidized annual grain crops. Universities focused research on corn, wheat, soybeans. If you wanted funding, you grew annuals. We chose wheat, corn, and soy. We accepted a system where 70% of our cropland requires violent tillage every year, destroying the soil, releasing carbon, demanding synthetic fertilizers. We traded a plant that takes care of itself for plants on life support, and we called it progress. The numbers tell a different story. The numbers don't lie. 94% of all plant species on Earth are perennial, yet only 13% of our farmland grows them. We looked at nature's blueprint. We studied it. Then we chose the exception. Annual crops occupy 70% of global cropland. Perennial crops occupy 13%. 94% of plants in nature return every year without replanting, but only 13% of our farms grow them. We inverted reality. Nature designed plants to persist, to build deep roots, to store energy underground, to survive winter and return stronger. But modern agriculture chose the opposite. Plants that perish every year, plants with shallow roots, plants that require constant intervention. We chose the exception and made it the rule. 70% of our cropland requires violent tillage every year, breaking the earth open, leaving fields bare, wind erosion, water runoff, carbon release. Why would we do this? This was a choice made by machines that could not handle perennial root systems, a choice made by seed companies that could not profit from plants you only buy once, a choice made by a green revolution that needed annual dependency. In the 1930s, the bill came due, the sky turned black, millions of acres turned to dust. Nature voted for perennials. We voted for annuals. And now, we are living with the bill. What we traded. Start with the soil. Every year, you break the earth open. You plant seeds. Then you leave it bare for months, exposed. Wind, water, carbon release. The American Dust Bowl was not a natural disaster. It was a choice. Annual agriculture requires tillage. You plow. You plant. The soil sits exposed. Wind strips topsoil. Rain washes nutrients away. Carbon escapes. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s was caused by this. Farmers plowed up perennial prairie grasses that held soil together for 10,000 years. They replaced them with annual wheat. When drought came, there were no roots. The soil turned to dust. It rose into the sky. It blocked out the sun. Millions of acres lost. A farmer named John Criss stood in his Kansas field in 1935. He watched the sky turn black at noon. He wrote that night, "The earth is leaving. I watch it go and cannot stop it. We broke what we should have kept." He abandoned the farm that year. The land never recovered. Perennials like Good King Henry have root systems that go down 3 feet. They hold soil together year-round. They prevent erosion. They sequester carbon. Research shows perennial crops reduce soil erosion by up to 50%. Then there is water. Annual crops lose up to 5 times more water than perennials because their shallow roots cannot access deep moisture. And the chemicals. Annual monocultures require synthetic fertilizers because tilling destroys soil biology. They require pesticides because bare fields are vulnerable. Perennials needed none of this. We traded plants that take care of themselves for plants on life support. But while the tractors conquered the fields, Good King Henry did not perish. It just waited. In the margins. Survival in the margins. While the tractors were conquering the fields, Good King Henry did not perish. It retreated to the gardens of stubborn grandmothers in Yorkshire, to wild patches near old monasteries, to the mountains of Switzerland, waiting. Nature plays the long game. When systems collapse, the things we erase do not disappear. They move to the edges. The places are too steep to plow, too remote to control. In Yorkshire, elderly women kept Good King Henry alive in their cottage gardens, not for nostalgia, for food. They knew what their grandmothers knew. Perennials return. Annuals demand work. Near abandoned monasteries, Good King Henry grew wild in forgotten corners. Monks had cultivated it for centuries. When the monasteries emptied, the plant stayed. It just grew, year after year. In the Swiss mountains where tractors could not reach, Good King Henry thrived. The old farms, the steep slopes. The stubborn families kept it alive, not as a relic, as food, as freedom. In 1985, a woman named Margaret Thornton passed away in Yorkshire at 93. Her garden had Good King Henry that her grandmother planted in 1889. 96 years, 4 generations, 1 planting. When her house was sold, the new owners ripped it out. They called it ugly. They planted annual petunias. The petunias withered by October. The Good King Henry tried to return. They poisoned it. It took 3 years to eliminate. This is how knowledge survives erasure, in the hands of people who refuse to forget, in places too marginal to matter, in gardens tended by old women who remember. Good King Henry waited in the dirt, in every escaped root, in every wild patch, in every grandmother's garden. Silent, patient, unkillable. And then something changed. The vault was opening again. The vault opens again. 2009, the Land Institute released Kernza, the first commercially viable perennial grain. 2 decades of breeding. Perennial wheat was finally real. And suddenly, the rules were changing. For 20 years, scientists worked to domesticate wheatgrass. Kernza produces grain like wheat, but with roots that go down 10 feet. It does not need replanting, it holds soil, it survives drought. The impossible had become possible. Climate change was forcing everyone to reconsider annuals. Droughts were lasting longer, floods were hitting harder. The stable conditions that made the Green Revolution work were ending. The crops feeding 8 billion people were bred for predictability. That predictability was collapsing. Soil degradation was accelerating. Water was becoming scarce. And suddenly, the characteristics we spent 70 years breeding out started looking less like inefficiency and more like survival. Deep roots, permanent coverage, self-sufficiency. Efficiency is not efficient if it destroys the soil. In 2022, the United States Department of Agriculture updated the Conservation Stewardship Program to include perennials for the first time. A small change, but it signaled something larger. Recognition that the annual monoculture system is not sustainable. The scientists knew, they just could not say it, not while the entire system was built on annuals. But the data was clear. Perennials were not the past. They were the future. The vault was opening. Not because activists demanded it, because the ground itself was failing. The system built on annuals was running out of soil, out of water, out of time. And good King Henry, it never disappeared. You can buy seeds online today. It waited 70 years. You just have to stop and dig. The Quiet Rebellion. You can buy good King Henry seeds online today. Plant them this spring, and unlike every other vegetable you grow, you will never plant them again. March. They return, and the March after that. For the rest of your life, the shoots will come up in March, thick pale green stalks pushing through cold soil. You snap one. It tastes like asparagus. The leaves will follow in April, dark green, shaped like arrowheads. You pick them. They taste like spinach, but richer, and they will keep producing until frost ends everything else. For 20 years, without replanting, without buying seeds, without asking permission. This is food that does not depend on a system, food that opts out of the machine, food that grows on its own timeline, without needing a tractor, a seed company, or a king's approval. When those shoots come up next March, you will participate in a quiet rebellion. You will be eating food that exists outside the industrial timeline, food that refuses to perish on schedule, food that cannot be controlled, cannot be patented, cannot be owned. King Henry IV made a promise, a chicken in every pot. It depended on wealth, on commerce, on a functioning economy. When economies collapsed, the promise failed. Good King Henry, the plant that lived in gardens for 500 years, asked for nothing. It just grew, every spring, every year, no matter what happened to empires or economies. One made a promise that required the world to cooperate. The other kept a promise the world had forgotten how to hear. And now, maybe we are starting to listen again. Not because we want to, because we have to. Climate models predict soil loss will make 50% of current farmland unusable by 2050, 26 years from now. Good King Henry has waited in the margins for 70 years. It can wait 26 more. The question is not whether the plant will survive. The question is whether we will. If this story changed how you see the weeds in your garden, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault. We are digging up the history they tried to plow over. Before we open the next vault, if these stories matter to you, the best way to keep this knowledge alive is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these vaults with those who need to remember what we forgot. Some promises are made with words, some are kept in roots that refuse to perish.